Welcome to Unlikely Freedom Fighters, the podcast for anyone whose political landscape looks more and more like a dystopian nightmare. For all of the everyday Americans out there just trying to build community, restore common sense while fighting what feels an awful lot like fascism. Before we begin, let's introduce the hosts of our show. My name is Kaylee Peterson. I am a sophomore in college, a mom of two, and also on my second run for the U.S. House in Idaho's 1st Congressional District.
And I am Bijan. I am Kaylee's campaign manager for this race. I am a very proud Mainer, and I will be your co-host.
All right, on today's episode, we'll be covering current events, brushing up on some political trivia, and sharing our fish out of water stories about being a progressive in a conservative culture. And last but not least, we have a very, very special guest to kick off our inaugural episode, the wonderful and talented Jess Piper. Jess, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be here with you guys.
Well, for anybody that doesn't know, Jess is a mother to 5 and grandmother to 3 who lives on a small farm in the Missouri-Iowa border. She was born and raised in rural America. You received degrees in both English and teaching from the University of Arkansas and was an American literature teacher for 16 years. After the 2016 election of Trump, you became more politically active and ran for office in 2022 for state representative in HD1 in Northwest Missouri. You didn't win the seat, but you did win over America's heart, and you used that experience to organize progressives in rural Missouri. Jess is the executive director of Blue Missouri and hosts a weekly podcast called Dirt Road Democrat, which can be found wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm incredibly excited to jump in today. We're going to jump right in, where what can sometimes be the scariest part of the day. Bijan has some current events out of Idaho for us.
I absolutely do. Thanks, Kaylee, and super excited to jump in with you, Jess. But first, let's unpack the news. We're going to be working on some current events today. So we've got 2 stories for you. So I need you to buckle up, and we're going to dive right in. So Idaho, let's talk about education. A new report highlights Idaho's need to focus on rural education during the upcoming legislative session. The Why Rural Matters 2023 report by the National Rural Education Association places Idaho in the lower half of U.S. states for rural student support, with one school counselor or psychologist for every 387 students, and just $4,900 per pupil for instructional expenditure. Idaho ranks last in this spending category. However, the state shows strength in rural high school graduation rates, and Governor Brad Little has highlighted education as a top priority for this agenda. But there's absolutely a need in the state to continue improving rural education. So the question is, if you look across the country right now, public education, regardless of state, it seems like these days has been under attack across the country. Teachers are being forced to take on roles they otherwise might not have in unexpected ways. Jess, Kaylee, is there hope for us yet?
There's always hope. And I will say that I know who is right above you guys in funding, 49th in educational funding, and that is Missouri. And we happen to be 50th in starting teacher pay. So I understand these struggles big time. I worked for 16 years. I had a master's degree. I was traveling the country teaching other teachers, and I walked away making $41,000 a year. And so when we talk about what new teachers are getting paid in places like Idaho, places like Missouri, there's a constant turnover. There's a revolving door of teachers in rural districts, small districts, because they're making $30,000 or $35,000 a year. They can't make it. And so they come in, and these districts put a lot of resources and time and energy into these brand new teachers, God love them. And then they're gone the next year to find somewhere where they can actually make some money to live. So the fact that we can't keep and recruit and retain teachers in rural spaces is a huge issue.
I know in Idaho, we really struggle because a lot of our towns have sister cities in eastern Washington. And with Idaho's pay being somewhere between $30,000 and $41,000 a year, and Washington's being closer to $75,000, $80,000 a year, so many of our teachers, especially in rural areas, have just gone over to Washington to work and then coming back. And it's interesting seeing Idaho kind of brag about this investment into school buildings and facilities, because what really started this was a massive article by ProPublica in the Idaho Statesman that showed Idaho school buildings were in absolute disrepair. Students were showing tarps holding up ceilings, students learning in teachers' lounges and hallways. So many of our rural schools weren't ADA compliant, just all over the place. And immediately after that came out in the last 30 days, our governor has now stepped up and gone, oh, you know what? We are going to invest quite a bit in Idaho schools. So it just goes to show paying attention and really pointing the finger and holding people accountable is kind of working.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was going to say my local school was not ADA compliant, and they are just now installing an elevator. And I tweeted out a picture that got a whole lot of interest on Twitter, and that was my daughter's social studies book, which was 20 years old. I mean, literally like old enough to vote, right?
Wow.
And people would say, well, gosh, they don't need textbooks, right? They're all going to be online. That's cute. Like all of our communities have internet access that's stable, right? I mean, it's a shame. And now we see them trying to privatize our public schools, trying to, push vouchers and that sort of thing, which is even more detrimental, especially to rural spaces.
It's devastating watching basically the defunding of education over the last 20 to 30 years. And then right now we're seeing special interests point the finger at public education and say we're throwing money after bad. I was like, if you had been throwing any money at this issue over the last 2 to 3 decades, we wouldn't be in this position. So it's definitely frustrating, especially for rural America when there is no school choice.
Right.
Well, I think to sort of blend everything from what I'm hearing together, it sounds like there is some hope, as so long as we have the both of you out there doing the hard work. So that makes me feel a little bit better. So thank you for all that you do, and it certainly isn't an easy battle that we have here, and thank goodness we have the both of you. Jess and Kaylee, I'd like to turn your attention to something a little more exciting, which seems to be a political trend and the center of controversy for many folks, which is the overturning of Roe v. Wade and all of the sort of effects that have come from that. In Idaho, as of recently, Senator Dan Foreman's introduction of Senate Bill 1229 seeks to tighten Idaho's abortion laws by removing exceptions for rape and incest. I know. Leaving only the imminent death of the pregnant patient as a legal defense for abortion. And it gets even worse. Following the overturning of Roe v. Wade in 2022, Idaho has implemented stringent abortion laws, as I'm sure we all know. And this bill could lead to prison terms of 2 to 5 years for doctors performing abortions under those now excluded circumstances. The bill, as I'm sure you can imagine, and for our listeners, has been met with extremely strong opposition from people all across the state, and I'm sure across the country as they're reading the news, particularly from figures like Laura Nakachea, many of whom are arguing that this represents an extreme shift in what is already considered an already sort of extreme political environment within the state. So Kaylee and Jess, we're seeing sort of ballot initiatives happen across the country around this. It's galvanizing Democrats from across the country. However, in red states, it seems to be a little bit of a different environment. What does this mean for reproductive health across the country, and what are the implications here?
Well, they're absolutely awful. And as someone who has given birth, I think that we need to step back for a second and talk to people about what that means. I have never been in more danger in my life than when I was pregnant. I have never been in more danger in my life than I was in a delivery room. The fact that I would have died, 40, 50 years ago after one of these births is something that people need to understand. This isn't just, an everyday thing. Everybody goes through it. It's easily done. That's not true. Another thing is that Idaho is losing, OBGYNs who are fleeing the state because they don't want to practice somewhere where it is unethical to take care of a pregnant woman. If you don't have the option to end or terminate a pregnancy on a woman who is dying, by the way, how do we know if she's dying? How low does her blood pressure have to go? How much does she have to bleed out? What are the standards for, being near death? And what I need everyone to know is they don't care. You can talk to these politicians and they don't care. And you have people that think you can reimplant an ectopic pregnancy. We had a lawmaker last year try to ban abortion for women with an ectopic pregnancy. And a Democratic, representative was examining him and said, do you know what the solution to an ectopic pregnancy is? And he did not. He did not know that you need an abortion to save your life, to keep your fallopian tubes from rupturing. Right, Kaylee? Like my head wants to explode.
I am so tired of watching men who have no idea what women's health even looks like making these decisions. And it's devastating. I meet so many women on the trail, both pre-Roe and now after the Dobbs decision, one of which is when you do lose a pregnancy, especially when you're 20, 30 weeks in. And the inability to have a termination, to have the abortion, to get that out of your body, you're now carrying around the hopes and dreams of your family and having then to either explain what's happening to you to every person who knows you're pregnant. The personal stories are devastating, but also, as a mother, my pregnancies couldn't have been more different. My daughter's labor and delivery took, I think, 18, 19 hours. It just would not happen. And my son, from start to end, was 2 hours, and he flipped breech and we had to do an emergency C-section. And the sensitivity and the care that my OBGYNs, that the hospital staff was able to provide me was such a comfort in what is one of the most terrifying times to be a woman and to be alive. So to watch people like Dan Foreman, who have never spoken to a woman about this circumstance, who have never heard these stories, who don't understand what a woman's fallopian tubes even are, is just beyond frustrating. And it breaks my heart because you're working with these women on a day-to-day basis who have real life experience in what this looks like and trying to fight for them. And it makes your job even more important. I know it's definitely a driving factor.
It is. And, I talk to my husband all the time. We have 2 daughters, and I tell him I'm not positive that it's ethical for me to stay in this state and raise a child who cannot access health care in this state. And it's not like I can just flee the state, but also they're talking about writing bounty bills that if someone were to leave, they could, someone else could turn them in for a bounty. I mean, that's going back to, fugitive slave laws. This is where they're pulling this stuff from. It's horrendous. It's maddening. And you guys already know this. It is galvanizing us on the left. We have people coming in left and right. We have now abortion is going to be on the ballot in Missouri this year. And guess what? It's 1 in 7 states. It'll win in 8. These people know it. And that's why, as well as I do, we have initiative petition in Missouri. And now they're going to go after that. Right.
Blazing the trail. I hope Idaho isn't far behind. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm really excited because now I get to move into the interview part with our featured guest, the incredible Jess Piper. Well, first of all, I can't tell you what it means, especially as a rural organizer, as a female candidate, as somebody in conservative heartland. Having you with us today just means the absolute world. So my first question, obviously, is how do we save America? And how is it possible?
I think it's possible. We have to be eternal optimists, right? Or we would go absolutely insane. It's time that we say the truth and we speak the truth. And I think that's why people are drawn to rural progressives, because like people will tell me all the time, aren't you scared? What am I going to be scared of, friend? What are they going to do? Take away my bodily autonomy, defund my school, close my hospital, make sure my roads aren't paved? They have done all those things. So they back people like me in a corner. And the only thing you can do is come out fighting, coming out swinging, right? And so that's how I think that we speak to people, is tell them the truth and say it in plain language where everybody can understand exactly what you're saying, and then pull them along. We know a lot of our problems are because people aren't going out to vote. We have abysmal rates of voting. I would knock on doors, and the data was bad because we hadn't had a candidate out here in forever, and I would talk to people who weren't registered to vote. And I just was like, would you like to register to vote? Can we take care of this today? Right. So getting people out there, and making sure that we're giving them a message of hope and please, we can change things.
I find that's a really common misperception, and it's easy why. So many of the people I talk to are scared. They're scared to
Mhm.
label themselves as a progressive, as a Democrat. And so many people, when I started just driving the state by myself, were really worried. But then what I realized is you're right. All of the worst things that they could possibly do have been done, and they're
Yeah.
doing it with legislation. And you hope that you can use your platform to inspire others, to show them that the bark is so much worse than the bite. And to be honest, the worst situations that I find myself in are online. When
Yeah.
I'm face to face with people in rural America, I have not once had a situation where we walked away mad or we walked away on bad terms. Which brings me into a fascinating point. You recently posted on social media that you are so often asked to explain the mind of a MAGA American, of a Trump supporter, of the far right. And unfortunately, that often leaves off what rural Democrats look like. And so I wanted to ask you, what do rural Democrats look like in Missouri?
They look like everybody else. I mean, we are here among everybody else, right? And I want to talk about that for a second because we are constantly asked to do the hard work, the emotional labor of looking at someone who votes for Donald Trump and trying to figure out how can we get them to vote for us? How can we bring them over? I'm going to tell you this, friends. If they have voted for Trump twice and are planning to vote for him 3 times, they are gone. There is no reason to waste your breath anymore. You need to be looking into your communities and gathering your crew and registering new voters. The young kids aren't putting up with this. They don't care if someone is trans. They think that schools should be funded. They think that if you need an abortion, you should be able to have access to an abortion. So you're bringing along those people. But I'm not going to spend one more second trying to dissect the mind or whatever illness these folks are suffering from, right? We move on and we get our crew and we go. So the people in rural America just like look like the people that are everywhere else. It's just that, like me, I don't like traffic and I have a donkey. I mean, I need to be, I need to be in cornfield somewhere, right? So that's what people should know. I still need education. I still need healthcare. I still need all the things that I would need in town, right? It
Right.
just, it looks a little different. But I'll say this too. We suffer from the same issues as inner cities do because our schools are being attacked. We don't have sidewalks. We can't find childcare. Pollution, it looks different out here. It's a CAFO and, it's a landfill in the city, but it's the same things. We're suffering from the same things.
It's fascinating how successful motivating the American public becomes when you just bring them policy solutions. When you take a problem they're facing and then you offer them a solution. I've noticed that because our policy stances are so strong and all the data and information kind of backs what we're saying, it usually turns to this kind of deceptive misinformation campaigns. People like the Freedom Caucus or the Idaho Freedom Foundation really go after you personally to try and define who you are in a way that scares a lot of rural America. Is that something that you've faced, trying to overcome what people think of you before they actually hear you speak?
Of course, but you're part of your community. I was part of my community. I was a teacher. So I could knock on a door and someone could call me a Marxist. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, I taught Teddy. Remember that? I mean, was I a Marxist then? I mean, so it's hard to put people in and paint them into a certain light when you are in your community doing the work and they know that you're not that person, right? So always getting someone who is part of their community is going to make it difficult. I mean, how they feel about, the Second Amendment. Well, we're gun owners, and people would always say, you're a gun grabber. I'm like, I don't want yours. I got my own, and they're probably better anyway, right? I mean, none of this stuff makes any sense when you're actually with a real person. And that's why, Kaylee, I think that rural Democrats are the way of the future. In Texas, they were able to stop vouchers because Democrats and rural Republicans who knew that these things would close their schools refused to vote for them. So there is something about rural folks. You can't, we're not definable. We own guns, right? We have, litters of children. we have, we're living off the land. So we're not that typical liberal. And they can't make us into one no matter how hard they try.
I can't believe what a successful, because I know one of the biggest obstacles I come across with working class people that I'm trying to support, whether it's labor or unions or just rural America, the first question I always get asked is, what do I tell people when they say you're going to take their guns? I'd be like, I'm from Idaho. No one's taking your guns. And I still remember going to the union convention and shooting a double barrel shotgun and just kind of oh, okay, wait a second. She's not as liberal as she looks online.
But you are as liberal as you look, but we're not defined like that. So you're breaking that stereotype, and that needs to be done over and over again. And you do it with rural candidates.
That's the goal. And what I'm finding is the more people step up, the more people kind of come out of the shadows. So many people are actually physically scared because of the political aggression, because of the rhetoric around these issues. But then once they see other people doing it, they see so many more people that look and sound and want the same things as them. I hear so many people in Idaho say, my vote doesn't count. So many progressive voters, so many people that don't agree with the far right say their vote doesn't count. But then in all actuality, the people who agree with good policy would far outnumber the far right voters if we could get them to the polls.
We see that in Missouri, and we know that that's true because progressive ballot initiatives pass. We have medical marijuana, recreational marijuana. We beat back right to work, and we expanded Medicaid, and we did that behind our legislators' backs, but with the initiative petition process. So we know that the majority of Missourians will vote for progressive ballot items. Now, people will say, well, then why in the world do you have a Republican supermajority? And Kaylee, I'll tell you this. Because 40% of the seats went uncontested, because 66 representatives walked down to the Capitol without so much as a job interview, and now they are writing laws, and they can be as extreme as they want because no one is opposing them. I can write them all day long, and they're like, I don't care. Nobody's going to oppose me, so I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to take this donor money, and I'm going to write their bill, and you're going to suck it up, or you can leave the state, right? That's the way that we take our states back, is to run everywhere. Make sure we have a candidate in every single seat, right? We may not win, but I'm going to make you stay home. I'm going to make you spend your money. I'm going to make you knock doors and come to forums and talk about guns and talk about schools and talk about abortion when you want to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop, right? I'm going to make you show up and do the work.
I love that. And I think it's probably the most satisfying part of the job is getting to hold people accountable. Whereas, I'm running against Russ Fulcher at a recent town hall. He actually said, all of his colleagues are for abortion up to delivery and even after birth. But we had several Kaylee for Congress supporters there in the crowd, and you could hear them going, you're misinformed.
Right.
You're misinformed. And you could see that he's just never had to deal with that pushback. And that's how they got me. I mean, they told me 60% of the races in the state were running unopposed. And I was a speech and debate kid. And I said, well, at the very least, I could have some fun with the messaging. And now, I couldn't imagine a greater passion in life. It brings me to an interesting dynamic, and I don't know if Missouri is dealing with the same thing, which is that the demographics in states that deal with policy issues like ours are rapidly changing. I know Idaho is losing a lot of our college-age students. A lot of young families that normally would come back aren't. What does the rural demographic look like in Missouri with millennial and Gen Z? Is there a struggle to keep younger families in the state?
Absolutely. It's a brain drain. People don't graduate from college and come back somewhere where they don't have bodily autonomy or where their schools are 4 days a week. You can't get a parent to relocate to a town. 30% of our schools are on a 4-day week because we haven't funded them. And there is no one that is going to move to that town and try to look for daycare 1 day a week. So we are seeing huge amounts of folks not coming back. And that really impacts places like where we are because the farms, you can't afford to buy land anymore. And so I really hit this hard when people talk about forgiving student loans and they act like it's all a bunch of liberals living in New York City. Well, you know who needs their loan taken care of? That's a kid trying to buy a farm of 200 acres, right? For $1.8 million. He really could use that. And we do have kids who graduate all the time with agriculture degrees and expect to come back home, and they absolutely cannot, right? They can't afford to do that if they've got $100,000 in loans. So I always remind people, student loan forgiveness helps everybody. It helps all of our economy, right? But it is an issue. My kids don't live near me, right? I mean, they're in Kansas City, they're in other places, except for one of our sons who is a teacher and can't afford to live anywhere else. So he's got a shed house in our pasture, and he heads to Iowa every day where they pay him $8,000 more than they do in Missouri. So the whole thing you can see is very problematic. And the way forward is making sure that we do have economic policies, that we do fund our schools, that we do make sure that women can get the health care that they need, that we do invest in childcare, right? That's a huge issue. We lose millions of dollars in productivity. That's from the Chamber of Commerce every single year because people don't have access to childcare. I drove 20 miles out of my way to come back to work every day because there was no childcare in my area.
Oh, I mean, I completely understand. I have an 11-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son, and we weren't able to afford childcare. That's why I stayed home for the length of time that I did. And even now, the only reason I'm able to travel as much or do the events that I do is because I have members from my debate team that offer childcare at a much lower rate than I would get anywhere else. Otherwise, I could never afford childcare while campaigning. And it's so difficult. We actually had our recent Senate Majority Leader who was talking in an interview on Zoom, and he said that the reason that Idaho cannot find a workforce or have people that will work in the service industry is because of the genocide of abortion.
I
And
knew you were going to say
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
And it was shocking because every student that I know so many incredible young minds that recently left this state, and all of them said it was because they couldn't find living wages, reproductive health care. There was no infrastructure. There was no real opportunities for them. So why would they stay? And it's devastating when the real problems are pushed to the side.
It really is for culture wars. And we know that the Republicans say outrageous things and put out outrageous bills because they don't actually have policies that help working class people. So they have to put trans kids on loop, and harm 9 kids in a state rather than help millions of people who they could with good policy. But we've been seeing this since FDR, right? I mean, they get so mad about policies that help people. I mean, that's what created the libertarians losing their mind was FDR helping people come out of the depression, right? Which is another reason why we should have fund education and teach real history because people would know that.
I know at some point we have to say we've been trying this for 50 years and it's done nothing but erase our middle class and create poverty and really incredible hardworking American citizens. So I don't know if you find this, but it's been an interesting realization as a candidate that the labels Democrat and Republican are just so uniquely defined to the person. And so it's been difficult because when people say Democrat, they often think of the DNC. And I even know progressive people who struggle voting for a Democrat because they think in this large, generic, kind of broad party system. And so I was wondering, how do you find your relationship with the party? And kind of as a follow-up, if you could wave your magic Missouri wand, What would that look like? What would Democrats be doing in rural America that they aren't now?
I would tell the folks who are the consultants for the party, you are missing a lot of votes by acting like rural America doesn't exist, by acting like every single one of us out here is a racist and voting for the, whatever GOP member they put in front of us. You are losing thousands of votes that could go to the top of the ticket, maybe not win a local election, but that would help someone that's running for governor, right? If I could wave my magic wand, I would make sure that candidates have funding. And folks should know that the state party, at least in Missouri, and I would say probably in Idaho too, is not reaching out and funding candidates across the state. And that is problematic. That is very problematic. I was able to raise a whole lot of money, $270,000 in a race that I shouldn't have raised $2.70. And you know what? People are asking me to donate it back to the to the Democratic Party. And I was like, friends, my donors sent this to me. They would have sent it to you if they wanted you to have anything to do with this. I would make sure that everyone is funded, everyone has a message, everyone has van, everyone has access to a network of people who are supporting them and who aren't actively fighting against them. And I'm not exactly always, playing along with the party. I do believe in our values, as Democrats. I'm very progressive and I believe in those values, but I really think that they are missing the boat by, avoiding huge swaths of America and just saying, well, the Republicans got that. And I'll say this too. The Republicans aren't here either. Nobody's knocking my door, sending me literature, asking for my vote. But you know who is organizing here, and that's the churches. They've got built-in organizing in every single small town 4 or 5 times over, right? And the Democrats just walked away and left that. Well, they've let it fester. And this is what happens. You end up with a supermajority.
Well, and I don't know if Missouri is like this. I know in Idaho, we really struggle with these massive information gaps. There is no
Mhm.
Idaho media north of Lewiston. A lot of the North Idaho news comes from Washington. A lot of the far right operatives actually have created their own fake news, literal fake news, where they create newspapers and make it look, I won't name them, but Idaho Tribune. But and so what I'm learning is just being there has done such a wealth of good for democratic policies, for actually finding solutions. But we need to increase that presence and really fill the gaps where there is no infrastructure support and people are just stepping into a complete unknown without a ton of guidance or structure.
Yeah, and you do that by running local candidates, by having people on the ground every single cycle, by making sure that people are knocking on the door. Because I know you're like me. I would knock on a door and somebody would come out and say, Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. And I'm like, what's that got to do with your road, friend? What's that got to do with the 20-year-old textbook your kid has, right? Joe Biden doesn't know where Burlington Junction is, but your representative does, and he's the one who's defunded your place, right? So that's why it's so important that we have candidates knocking doors, boots on the ground every single cycle, or else they do end up in these information cycles. They have never heard a Democratic message unless someone knocked their door and gave it to them. Because if you watch Fox News, or you're watching Breitbart or Newsmax, you are only hearing that we have horns growing out of our head. And that's why when I knock on a door and they're like, she doesn't have horns growing out of her head, I'm not going to vote for her, but I'm going to listen to her, and maybe next time I might vote for someone, right? So it's the long game. The Republicans played it. Look, they got SCOTUS. They've been playing that game since the 50s, and they finally did it. And it's time for Democrats to stop taking these quick shots. This district can flip. We're going to put all of our resources in this district and forget about the 46 others. It's not working. And you can look at places like Missouri, where we do not have one Democrat elected statewide, and you can see how that has worked out. It's done terrible. So we run everywhere. Every single race is important.
I couldn't agree more. And it's just so inspiring to see women like you who saw this need. And that's how Blue Missouri came about, right? I would love to know just a little bit about how Blue Missouri started and where you're at now and your hopes for the future.
Well, it was actually started by my friend, Michelle Hornish, who is an attorney who after 2016 was horrified, like most of us were. And she realized, she looked around and she was like, we don't have candidates running in these areas. And just that light clicked. And after I lost my race, and you probably know this as well, there is no infrastructure for candidates who have lost to keep going, or what's next? What do I do next? Right. And so she called me up. She was like, would you like to work with me? And I was like, heck yeah, I would, because this is exactly what we need to do. I could raise a lot of money for myself, and I ended up, not winning. I would like to raise a lot of money for all the people that are running in races like I was, and send them a check, which is exactly what we do. After the primaries are over, we send whatever we have to each of the nominees. Last year, we were able to do $1,200 for state reps, and it was close to $3,000 for state senate. In Ohio, who has the matching program with a lot more people. I mean, they're really, it's a bigger state, a lot more people. I think they're sending like $5,000 to down ballot candidates, which, Kaylee, is life changing for somebody. That means you can get lit, you can get signs, you can run an ad on, the local radio, you can pick up a little digital. I think it's really important too for people to understand how expensive it is. You live in a rural place. I do too. We have those big signs that we put out at farms, and at least in Missouri, those are $100 a piece. Like, that's expensive. Each of those little signs is $5. The lit we got could be, $8,000 to put on people's doors. And then you still got to pay for gas somehow. You got to pay for a couple people maybe to knock doors when you're not able to do it. These things are expensive. And my friend Debbie Kitchen, she works with Indivisible. She always says, you got a budget for democracy, right? And I'm like, you really do.
I do. I wish people understood. I usually try and tell them how desperately investment in these areas is needed. I know with my race in 22, my first time running, I raised $70,000, which I was really proud of as an unknown with no connections, just driving the state. But most congressional races run between 1 and 3 million minimum. And so trying to let people know, supporting groups like Blue Missouri, supporting races in your local area just could not be more important.
It really is. And it is a wise investment. And people will often say, well, why am I going to invest in a race that we know is not going to flip in a cycle? And that's just it. It's not. And it's going to take you the next cycle and maybe 3 cycles. And in places like where I am, we haven't elected a Democrat in 32 years. So that may be a 10-year process, but that's how we start. Remember, that's that long game. So it's very worthwhile to donate to folks that have no shot of winning this time, because it's an investment, right?
Long term. Well, I don't think there's any better way to end an interview with 2 rural candidates than ending it on donate, donate, donate.
Give us your money.
I am just unbelievably excited to see what the future of Missouri and Idaho looks like, and what we're able to do long term. To lighten it a little bit, I'm going to throw it over to Bijan, who has some trivia for us, some unlikely freedom trivia.
You better believe that I do. And just like we all should be investing in races like these, we're going to invest some time in these ridiculous questions. So Jess, Kaylee, it's my turn, and we're gonna jump right in here. So we've got a couple of questions, and the whole flow of the game is it's red state, blue state. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna ask a question. Our lovely team has spent some time putting together and selecting some questions that hopefully won't stump you, but you might also learn something as well. And so we're gonna jump right in, and I'm anxious to see what you kind of think about all of this. So. Okay, so the first question that we have, the question is, what state completely reversed the flow of one of its major rivers back in the 1900s?
Is that Missouri with the New Madrid, with the earthquake?
Kaylee?
Because it was the Mississippi River that went backwards, right? Is that, or no, you're not talking about backwards. It just moved it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Jess is the smartest person in the room right now, so I'm going to jump on and say Missouri as well.
I was actually going to say it's almost like you knew what I was going to ask ahead of time. The answer might surprise you. Illinois, blue, obviously, reversed the flow of the Chicago River in order to prevent water contamination.
Oh, no,
Hold
but
on. Yeah.
somebody needs to tell Iowa about that. They're contaminating the whole dang country. Did you know that Iowa is responsible for the dead spot in the Gulf of Mexico? That's Iowa. Do you know
Is
that?
that right?
All that corn? Yeah, that's Iowa.
Because of the flow all the way down, really?
Yeah, you have to have put so many chemicals on corn to grow it, and then they have straightened out all of their streams, and they run straight into the Gulf, and so there's that huge dead zone with all those, fish floating and everything. And thanks, Iowa.
If I had known that it was to avoid contamination, I probably would have guessed a blue state.
instead of putting it in our wells.
Oh man! All right, what else do you have for us?
Okay. So we're going to continue. I mean, I hopefully you learned something new there. I mean,
I did.
When we were researching some of these questions, it's kind of just eye opening. I mean, I didn't know that, but it totally makes sense. Totally makes sense
Yeah.
about slow down from Iowa. So, okay, moving on. The next question for you and this group here is: what state has an alcoholic beverage as its state drink?
Wisconsin?
What we're going to do on this question, let's start with whether or not it's red state or blue state, and then you can tell me the state.
I honestly would go with Wisconsin because everybody I know there drinks, right from the morning. I mean, like everybody, there's, I'd probably say red state, but I don't know. Wisconsin isn't really red. I mean, they have, I don't know. I'm going with Wisconsin. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to answer these all wrong, and then I'm going to give you a fact that you didn't know, so I don't look so dumb every single time.
I love that. You came prepared.
I also don't know if the state I'm thinking of is red or blue because it's New Jersey, and you'd think Democratic, but then Chris Christie came from there.
Yeah.
So I don't know how red it goes, but I'm going to guess New Jersey because why wouldn't it be New Jersey?
Okay. For the record, Jersey being blue might come as a surprise. So it's a red state, if that helps, and it's in the South. I'll give you a hint. Does that help in any way? How about we go one more time? It's red.
Alabama, Mississippi.
Texas.
Okay. Well, Jess, actually, you know what? There you go. You got it spot on. It's Alabama. The answer is Alabama.
Alabama.
And so, fun fact, the state drink is, I hope I'm saying this right. And if anybody's going to be listening in Alabama,
Hotty toddy.
Please, I wish. Please don't eviscerate me for saying this name incorrectly. Conecuh, I hope, Conecuh Ridge, Alabama Fire Whiskey, which was made official in 2004. Also the same year the Red Sox won the World Series. Just have to put that out there as a mainer. In 2004, it is a fire whiskey in Alabama.
Yeah,
He
that's
knows
called
I'm a
Fireball.
diehard.
You're a diehard what?
He knows I'm a diehard Yankees fan, so he's doing that to poke me. But I need to ask because my personal experience campaigning in rural America, whiskey is where it's at. It's the way to the heart of America.
Liquor's quicker, right? I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Look, I mean, anything to bring us together. Am I right? Anything.
Yeah. When we're drunk, we all get along. It's fine.
Okay. With that being said, I've got one more, and I'm going to try not to stump the both of you. I want to make sure that we continue this sort of train here. The last question for both of you is: what state does the largest beagle in the world live? Largest beagle in the world.
I'm going to say that this is probably a northeastern state. This sounds like something someone in the Northeast would like. I don't know, maybe Midwest. I'm going to go with Connecticut with the biggest beagle. I don't know.
Okay. So we have Connecticut. Kaylee, your home state, and
I'm going to say blue state because they probably get more funding for animal rescue. I'm going to go with Maine. For the excess.
See, just so she has to.
She knows you.
She not only knows me, but she knows that I'm a Red Sox fan too. So That'll make sense. You know what? Look, as a proud Mainer, I would have loved to have this title. Like, we have our lobsters, we have our toothpicks, we have our blueberries, but we don't have the world's largest beagle. I'll tell you what state does, though. Jess, you're going to be in the state very soon. It is Idaho.
Oh, there we go.
In fact, it is in Idaho. Yeah. Idaho, his name is Sweet Willie, and it's a 30-foot tall beagle in Cottonwood, Idaho. And you can
Oh,
sit there.
they're talking about the B&B. I drive by this B&B that's in the shape of a beagle every like 2 weeks.
I thought we were talking about an actual dog, and I was like, well, it's going to die. It's going to be replaced all the time.
Surprise. It's an Airbnb. Oops. Well, now you know. Now there's a 30-foot tall beagle in Cottonwood. There's an Airbnb, folks. So if you're looking on Airbnb and you're looking in Cottonwood for a vacation or a long weekend, now you can stay in a beagle. Something that I've always wanted. Jess, can I put you on the spot real quick?
Sure.
Okay, so we know that Idaho has a 30-foot tall beagle in Cottonwood. Does Missouri have anything equivalent?
We have some big Mark Twain statues out in Hannibal because he's from Missouri. I'm trying to think of something outrageous. And it's just, we have a town named Cooter. I don't know if that counts for anything.
It counts for everything, Jess.
We have a very lovely Democratic senator from there. And he's gay. He's openly gay, and he always talks about a gay boy growing up in Cooter. Senator Greg Razor. I mean, it brings the house down every time.
We'll take that. We'll take that.
Well, just knowing how unique the experience is in what we're doing in rural America, I would love to end the show on a fish out of water story. Do you have anything from the trail, any of those classic moments that just stick out that we should end the show on?
I have a really good one. I mean, I have a couple that weren't so nice, but I was campaigning in a little town called Albany, and I had been a teacher there for a little bit and had coached cheerleading there. And it was 7 o'clock in the morning. It was super cold, and had some coffee with friends. And then we just started, walking around the neighborhoods. And I was walking, didn't have the chance to knock. And a lady from either side of the road both came running down to the street when I was walking. And both of them said, I'm so happy that you're running. I'm so happy that we know that you're here. And I have daughters in this state, and we absolutely have to fight back. And so just knowing that they were just randomly sitting and saw me and came running down was a huge thing. And that's what I'd like to end it on, is that, Kaylee, you're making a difference because you're there. You're making a difference because it is undemocratic to not have a choice. You're making a difference because you are fighting for people, and you're clearing out the culture wars, right? And you are saying, I'm going to do these things for you. And that's why it's so important that we have a Kaylee in every single district running and fighting and passionate. And I'm telling you, they have co-opted the word, but you're a patriot. You're the one who's standing up. You're doing the hard things, and you are the one who is fighting. You're the one who's a patriot.
Well, I know that it would be so much harder if there weren't women across the nation. The sisterhood and the collaboration and just being able to work with people in politics in this way, it really does feel like a little bit like working with family, and it makes the whole thing so much easier. And then when you have success and you make life a little bit better, it just makes everything incredibly worth it.
Exactly.
And it makes it so enjoyable to work with both of you. I mean, Kaylee and I have been working together for some time now, and I think the point is, and just a message that I'd also like to share is that you have the ability to drive change in your community.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people out there that sort of feel like their voice doesn't matter, that even with participating, the voice isn't heard. And that's not necessarily true. I mean, this experiment is built on individuals like the both of you and folks that will never be on cable news, that are doing the hard work in their community. It often goes unseen. And so the point is that you have the power as an individual in this country to be able to make that change. But it does start with being brave enough to step up and to have your voice be heard. So I just sort of wanted to drop that in there, that you can affect change. You can make things change. It is within your power. You do have to bring others along for the journey, but those that are willing to do the hard work, I think you'll be really happy with the end result.
Exactly.
Well, and I like to say our community is a lot of fun. I don't know about you, Jeff, but
Absolutely.
our Liberal Dems and progressive voices, we have a lot of fun in the background. So.
Exactly. Me too. I mean, there's 4 of us, but we're having a great time.
All right. I have to know, one, where can your listeners find you online? Do you have anything big coming up that you want to share? What's going on for you next?
Well, I'm doing a lot of traveling. I'm heading to Idaho. Once in February and maybe again in April. But you can find me online. You could just search Jess Piper, but on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'm Piper from Missouri. On TikTok, I am Jess Piper Mo. You can find me at the Dirt Road Democrat. That's my podcast that comes out every single Thursday. And then, reach out to people that are doing what we're doing and, support somebody. If and I know lots of lovely men who are progressives, Bijan being one. But if you know a woman who is maybe thinking about this, you have to remember women have to be asked over and over and over again. They say about 7 times before they finally think, maybe I could do this. So I would say reach out, to women and see if they're interested in doing that. But as far as big things coming up, I'm all over the state talking to groups of people to get, cheerleading basically for local candidates in Missouri.
That's perfect. I like to say, because so many women I talk to say, I'm not qualified. Who would want to listen to me? Why should I run? And I try to tell them there is not one single man in our Capitol building asking themselves if they're qualified to make decisions on our behalf. And I trust almost any woman that I work with more than I trust a lot of the men in the state house. So go for it.
Exactly. You will get over any imposter syndrome if you tune in to just one session and listen to these folks that are speaking. You're like, all right, I feel good. I can do this, right? If a boy can do it, I can do it too.
Exactly. And check out Dirt Road Democrats. If you're interested in following along with our campaign, you can find it at KayleeForCongress.com. Also check out our Counties for Kaylee program, where we're just connecting people from all over the state and country who want to have an impact in places like Missouri or Idaho. But please just reach out and get connected. That was our show, and I'm excited we'll be back soon with more political content. Until then, I'm asking everyone out there to thrive, survive, and please organize.
Unlikely Freedom Fighters is a bi-weekly podcast written, produced, and edited by Lucas Longacre and associate producer Nick Spro. Our title track, We Go Again, is by Joseph. Have any questions or comments? You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Unlikely Fighter, or on Facebook at Unlikely Freedom Fighters. We'll leave you with the immortal words of Plato. The heaviest penalty for declining to rule is to be ruled by someone inferior to yourself. Thanks for listening or watching, and hope to see you again in the next episode.